To the left.
To the left, thank you.
That's it.
1700s, very interesting century again, where there should be strong development. And that should be in the area of idealistic activity, radical new knowledge and new approaches to the cyclical theme. So the 6th century had been developmental. The 7th century was bound to be revolutionary because it's an opposite. And what happened was this tremendous idealistic activity breaking out in the philosophy and the books that were now being printed large scale through the printing press and pamphlets. The philosophies of Rousseau and Voltaire, the thoughts that man, should be more free than he is, and why isn't he? And that became a theme which supposedly ignited the revolutions that occurred in that century, but I'm not so sure, because I know that in the 1770s you had the Illuminati being formed in Germany. 1776.
Yes.
I don't think that's a coincidence. That very shortly afterwards you had these cataclysmic revolutions.
Yeah, the French Revolution.
The French Revolution, the American Revolution, which were largely instigated by Freemasons.
Yeah.
Which we won't find in the history books.
Yeah, Thomas Jefferson, who was a Freemason, he actually stressed quite strenuously that this new group, splinter group, Illuminati, is a deadly threat. He actually wrote a letter, I think Thomas Jefferson, not Jefferson, George Washington was the first to identify the Illuminati as a serious threat, not only to America, but they were going to undermine the freedom and, ironically, the welfare of all mankind everywhere. That was George Washington's worst fear, but his nightmare seems to have come true.
Yes, it was a different Illuminati to what we have now, but it was the kind of an earlier stage of it. Yeah, that's right. And interestingly, the vibration of 7, I can't find my wheel, I've lost it. The vibration of 7 is about secrecy as well. Yeah, and secret activity and formation of policies and strategies and so on. So that was very much going on, I believe, behind the scenes.
Are you looking for your water?
Yeah, I'll do this. I so need this. Thank you very much. It was a time of great philosophers too. We had the greatest philosophers, I believe, in that century: Immanuel Kant, David Hume, Leibniz, Bishop Berkeley, Thomas Paine. Great minds, and they emerged in the century to do with mental activity. There's the 7 vibration. That's what it's all about. Enlightenment sought through knowledge, music. We had the greatest composers: Bach and Vivaldi, and even Beethoven, born in 1770. It was a really great time for activities of the mind and compositional activity. Same with even with economics and with chemistry, biochemistry, Priestley that was helping us to understand the human body, and for the first time, and Adam Smith analysing economic activity in the Wealth of Nations. There was so much good activity going on, but there was also this very idealistic energy, and it kind of broke out, whether it was manipulated by the Illuminati or whether the vibration of the times demanded it. We had 3 major revolutions in that time. We had the English Industrial Revolution, we had the American War of Independence, causing the formation of the United States of America, and we had in France, we had an amazing event, the French Revolution, where the entire monarchy and all the top elite were unceremoniously dispatched, and then the Reign of Terror and so on. It was really a remarkable time, that the 1700s. There was a real buzz, and it's funny because it should be a quiet time. At 7, if you have a personal cycle stage of 7, it's about thinking and about retreating into yourself and developing ideas which you can learn to use in the next stage of the cycle. But perhaps we had so much revolution because it's also about kind of inner activity, inner conflict rather than outer conflict. And that's what revolution is, isn't it? Yeah? It's kind of reassessing oneself and fighting what needs changing inside. You know, that's what revolution is all about. It's about interior change. The 1800s, with the 1800s, we come to the climax of the entire cycle. And this is when we can expect a peak of activity. And it would obviously be in the area of asserting power, because that's what, you know, the positive aspect of what it's all about. A very strong century. Again, although it's practical and it's an even number, it's actually a strong energy, 8, because it is the peak of activity. We had the occupation with power, materialism and enterprise. This was when the rest of Europe became industrialized, and everywhere factories and mills and mechanical processes started changing the way that everything was produced economically. Industrialization subjected millions of people, including children, to virtual slave labor in mines and factories. Now, slavery had come back because slaves were needed to establish the territories around the world that the imperialists had set up. But there was virtual slave labor as well in this country, just to man the factories. Railway engines, blast furnaces, rolling mills, textile plants, coal and iron mines all exuded an extraordinary sense of force and dynamism, had somehow been liberated from nature and put into the service of humanity. So it was a time for science and technology to blossom, and for that kind of activity to reach its peak. It was also the time for the peak of the city-states, of nationalism, and for global imperialism. Europe had started off very, very weak in the year 1000, far weaker than China or the Muslim world, but it had set its sights on taking over the world, and it achieved that in the 1800s. We had, how many empires did we have in that time?
Several. We
had the British Empire, obviously, but we had empires formed by France, by Spain in the Americas, the Austrian-Hungarian Empire, the Habsburgs. Belgium had foreign territory. Belgium in the Congo, in Africa. We had the scramble for Africa, you know, by Germany and Italy. They had empires. The whole of Europe was dancing, you know, madly, thinking that it now possessed the world. Yeah? So, and that was started by Napoleon, perhaps. He conquered Europe and set up the French Napoleonic Empire from the borders of Portugal to the borders of Russia, all the way across continental Europe. And in a way, you know, if one individual sums up the entire millennium and its search for authority, conquest and power, perhaps it could be Napoleon. And that was in the 1800s. So it was a kind of apotheosis. The 1900s, this is a century that we all know from our own experience, and should have been about cyclical endings, drama, pluralism, humanitarianism, and transition. And so it would be a very, very interesting century with what could be promised as erratic development. What did we get? We did indeed have major endings. All those empires that were formed, that were established previously, started to collapse, and indeed finished collapsing by the end of the century. All the European empires and the dictatorships in South America, and those dictatorships we had under Mussolini and Hitler and Franco in Spain, because dictatorship is the negative energy of one, and it's a one energy, and it cannot outlast that century. We don't have any more dictatorships, do we? We've got a different kind of dictatorship now, which I'll go into in a moment. But overt dictatorship could not have survived.
Robert Mugabe still exists as a last dictator.
Thanks, Ted. Yeah, okay. Aggression and domination related drama. We had plenty of that, 2 world wars. We had repeated genocides. We had revolutions, a lot of erratic activity, a lot of upheaval, rise and fall of communism, American invasions and wars. There was a lot of very negative one type activity being exacerbated by the opposite kind of energy of number 9. But number 9 energy also had its day in the 1900s with the pluralism of earlier developments, much more kind of dispersed and fragmented growth in terms of invention, capitalism, science, technology, computing, communications, trains, transport, aeroplanes and all that. It was all proliferating in the 1900s, as we would expect under the pluralism of that vibration. Also, humanitarianism did come in a big way, came into the picture with women being able to vote, equal rights for women arriving, peace campaigning, charity work, civil liberties, human rights, animal rights, environmental awareness, and some individuals very humanitarian arriving, Mother Teresa, Diana, Martin Luther King, Gandhi. So there was some great humanitarian activities happening, and the equivalent meme of that time in the psychological framework was promoting a sense of community and unity, sharing society's resources among all, which brings us to, well, all right, I won't. Let's just stay for a moment with, before we look at the resources, the picture regarding resources. Let's just have a look at the overall 1 millennium. We have two sets of activity. We have revolutionary and developmental, alternating with each century. So we had the Northern Crusades, humanism of the Renaissance. We had all these revolutions, the conquest of the Americas, the Reformations, the Enlightenment, and the dramatic endings. Those all happened in the odd-numbered centuries, which are revolutionary. But in even-numbered centuries, we had consolidation and development of those same revolutions, which helps us to determine what's going to happen in this century, the 2000s. In the last century, we had the ending of domination and authority, overt authority. And we had the emergence of information technology and much greater, more efficient communications by all people, among all people. That started particularly with the invention of the internet at the end of the 1900s. That started and will continue during the 2000s, the 2000s. That gives us a clue what we can expect next. Also, we can expect to see a radical restructuring, for, a new paradigm affecting power, the way power, what we have inherited in terms of power from the last millennium. We had the one church breaking up and becoming diffused by the end of the millennium. We had the diffused power centres at the beginning coalescing into one elite-led military-industrial complex, which is what we've got today, with Bilderberg Group and the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, JP Morgan, the big banks, the big corporations that now govern this world through, and hold the government in their power. This is what we've got now, one elite power. And we're going to have to see, we're going to see this having to be renegotiated during this new millennium that is starting. The end of the 1 millennium then brings great transition and also serious concerns to do with massive wealth inequalities, unsustainable resource depletion, nuclear waste, pollution, rainforest destruction, species extinction, self-serving centralised shadow government, and very much epitomised or symbolised in this scene from the end of Kubrick's film about evolution, when that great marker or bookend appears at the end of the process of that particular cycle of evolution. In the cosmic hotel room, where the patient lies on the deathbed and awaits whatever follows. A very, very incredible scene, and very evocative of what confronted mankind in 1999 as we were going into the new era. And indeed, what was that new era going to hold for us? Where does all that activity, all that inheritance of that race for power take us. There we see the fetus in that movie on the bed. The patient is dead now and reborn. To what? To a new millennium. It's a 2 millennium this time. In a long cycle, it's the second of the 9 millenniums. And again, it's the same vibration, consolidation of new ventures, increased partnership and cooperation. In this particular set, this is the entire millennium, and this century that we're in now is also a 2 century. So we've got double emphasis on 2. It's the entire millennium, and it's this particular century. We are in a buffer zone before the new 9-stage cycle begins. Logically, that will begin in 2100. Yeah? There'll be another 9 stages, 9-century cycle. We are in the 2000s transition century, where the vibration is pure number 2. It will be gentle this century. Russell Brand is totally wrong. There's not going to be a violent revolution. How can there be in a 2-dominated century, where we're not even in a 9-stage cycle? So there's not going to be a revolution. There'll be gentle, mild development of everything that happened in the last century. And it will be sweet, it will be gentle, but there will still be the negative side of 2, the negative manifestation of 2 energy. Let's just stay for a moment with what we can expect according to the psychology of spiral dynamics. This is very, very interesting because it gives us more information than the numerology does. And what it says, that what we can expect under second tier values, which is equivalent to the next stage of development after the first millennium, the 1 millennium, we can expect the systemic mean, accepting the inevitability of nature's flows and forms, a focus on functionality, competence, flexibility and spontaneity, and so on, right down to demanding integrative and open systems. Now, this is very gentle and this is very conscious, conscious on all sides of all parts of the system with each other. Maybe further on in the 2 millennium we can expect the global view, the holistic mean, called turquoise, which will be a blending and harmonising of a strong collective of individuals, a focus on the good of all living entities and integrated systems, expanded use of the human brain, the mind, and tools and competence, self as part of a larger conscious spiritual whole that also serves the self, global networking seen as routine, acts for minimalist living, so less is actually more. I believe that a lot of this is in our future and is yet to manifest, but we'll do so over the 2 millennia, which will be a millennium in numerology of partnership and cooperation, sensitivity and sharing, particularly this century, which, as I said, stands alone in its 2 vibration. We start off in 2000 with our nation-state governments, with a capitalistic, all-controlling system, the corporate military-industrial complex, this coalescing of power, and that must develop, but it cannot develop in the way of grabbing more power. It has to develop towards viability, a kind of sustainable shared responsibility in a free society. Now, optimistically, I say that this can happen by the year 2100, almost within our lifetime. But whether it takes the whole of a millennium or just 1 century, who can say at this stage? Where we are now is in this buffer zone between the 1 and the 2 millennium. And it is a time of, indeed, a massive paradigm shift. Yeah, it's going to be a time of partnership and cooperation in the positive manifestation. But negatively, it could equally be a time of meddling and scheming, of corruption and conspiracy, which are all attributes of 2 and it's negative. So it could be a time of globalization and a kind of commonwealth of people coming together globally, all to help each other. Or it could be a time of a global dictatorship being developed behind the scenes, I mean, only yesterday I received an email